I hope you all had a good week. I hope you, again, I hate that we had more school shootings, but now you see the necessity for the crisis plan. Get out as quickly as you can if you haven't already. Find out what's going on at your school in terms of who manages that, where is it, how long does it take to find them, does it make sense, has it been updated, are there recent class rosters in there? My suggestion is when they put you in charge of the crisis box, that you or the data manager at your direction updates class lists weekly every Monday. I would update the class lists and those things to make sure you know where kids are at all times. Again, you don't need it at all until you do, and then it's the most important thing in the world. It has no value or importance why you don't need it when you don't need it. It's kind of like insurance. When things are going good, you don't even think about it. You pay the premiums, but man, when you need it, it's the most important thing in the world. And that's your crisis plan. So make sure you have not got out and done your work on your crisis plan that I assigned you in your discussion board assignments. Get out and do it soon. As we start out every week, let's look at our weekly schedule in terms of what we have to do. So this is week 2, January 22nd through the 28th. Preventive law, developing risk and crisis management plans. The principal's guide to school law. Tremaine.
Yes, sir.
Welcome. I went to the bookstore today. I purchased you a book, and I have the other one. We didn't have one of these, so Seth is going to mail you your books in the morning, and I'll get them as quickly as possible. Again, I apologize that we didn't. They had them in the bookstore. We ran out of them here in our little book room in the School of Ed, but we have them now, and we'll get them to you tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome, Tremaine. He's a readmit coming back with us. He's been in the program before. Welcome to we meet on 7 o'clock on Wednesdays. Tremaine, we'll probably need to get you into a peer review group. If anybody would like to invite Tremaine into their group. Now, these folks have been working already for a semester, and they have some groups. But if you have less than 5 in your group and you'd like to welcome Tremaine into your group, please do. So, Tremaine, if you will go to the discussion board to the week 1, I believe, or in the discussion board, I have a place for you to put your contact information. If you have anybody in a couple of days, you let me know, and I'll assign you a group. Okay? We need to get you started on your peer reviews of your evidence artifact task, and your classmates will certainly help you with that. So this week's reading is Principal's Guide to School Law, Chapter 1, and looking on your individual websites about safety and plans and district plans. Your discussion board 1 is to locate copies of your school emergency plans, read and assess those plans. So that's what you need to be working on this week. And then your discussion board, let's look at that right quick. Back to the desktop. So if we look at that discussion board, locate copies of the emergency crisis plan. How long did it take for you and your administrator to find the crisis plan? According to what you read, is the plan appropriate? Every semester I get people, I won't mention names, I'll get people who are like me who are just appalled that nobody knows where it is. It's 3 or 4 years old, doesn't have any class rosters in it. If you were to have an emergency, you wouldn't be able to find anybody. You don't know where you evacuate to. That plan should have 3 evacuation spots, one on your campus, like out at the ball field, one at a local, like at a church that you can walk to, and one that when you walk to the church, they pick you up there in buses and cart you off to another facility. I'm amazed that folks, again, you don't need it until you do, and then when it goes wrong, the red and green cards on the back of the door, all those things are part and parcel of that plan. They vary from district to district. You need to find out where they are and who's in charge of it. It's going to be you when you're an AP. And you're going to think, well, I'm so busy, what's the likelihood of that happening? Well, it's like the lottery. The odds are long, but when the number hits on you, in statistics, in my weekend job, we all have weekend jobs here at a small university. I teach statistics in the doctoral program. That's actually my area of expertise in terms of academics. And so I teach statistics. And there's a field called binary statistics. And in that field of statistics, it speaks to either something happens or it doesn't. And all odds are 50-50. When the outcomes is so severe that you can't live through it, you have to switch over from odds. The odds are 1,000,000 to 1 that there'll be a shooting at my school. You have to look at it as binary. Either there will be or there won't. There's a 50-50 chance. I better be prepared. It either will happen or it won't happen. My deceased brother-in-law made the mistake of saying, although we're under a tornado watch, it's 1,000,000 to 1 that a tree will fall on my truck on the way home 300 yards from my home and kill me instantly. But he made that mistake. He took that risk, not understanding that either it will happen or it won't. And he left children and grandchildren because he made that mistake of thinking it's 1,000,000 to 1. You can't look at the odds of it happening. What you have to look is, can I live with it if it does happen? And when something is that severe, when the outcome is that deadly or injurious to you or others or your career, you have to look at it as a 50-50 chance. So you better, so when you're in charge of that, you better take it seriously. You can't just look at it, oh, it's 1,000,000 to 1. It's binary. Either it happens or it doesn't. So the odds are 50-50. That's a little statistics lesson tonight. And that's why I have you doing that. So those are the things that you're working on this week on your own. All right. So let's look at the questions right quick. He can join us. We lost Corey. I'll email you, Tremaine. All right. Tremaine, you'll get an email from Elizabeth. All right. Good. All right. So, yeah, y'all lost Corey. That's right. Corey Chitwood dropped. So Tremaine would be a good one for you to have. So there you go. You've already found somebody.
Okay.
Isn't that wonderful? All right. So, new share. Let me go back to show all windows and find what I'm looking for. All right. So that's what we're doing classwork this week. In terms of your evidence artifacts on week 2, continue on OMA task 1. You should be getting it to a time when you can start to Zoom review it. You should be setting up your schedule to be doing that. You folks do that on your own. And you should start looking at OMA task 2. And I've already covered those with you. Remember, if you have questions about evidence artifacts, I'm going to have my intern shell up pretty quickly where you'll be able, once you get stuff peer reviewed, you'll be able to stick it. You'll get an intern shell. The XM shell, if it's still there, it will work. The XM intern shell that said executive internship, XM, if it's still there next to your 603 class, it will work, or next to your 601. You can send me work, but make sure you peer review it first. So you should be in the throes of peer review right now of task 1 and start looking at task 2 in week 2. That's where you should be in your evidence artifacts. All right. All right, so let's look at our weekly content for our session tonight that I want to cover with you. This is week 2. First thing I want to introduce you to tonight is I have the OMA template under tonight, and that specifically tells you, is a template for you to drop your work in. We had those last semester for the AppTel and the AppSell. Here's the one for the OMA. Now, Dr. Stedman, as you know, is a lot better person than I am. I'm the bad cop. He's the good cop. But I have provided you an OMA example. So if you click on that link now, it's from the state of Hawaii. So you can't copy it, but it still is a good format for you. It's one of ours, but I have an intern, Amber. She's a Air Force dependent, and so she left Jacksonville, North Carolina, and now is in Hickam in Honolulu, Hawaii. So she's doing her work from out there right now. But it is our format. It will show you that, and she is an excellent student. She just completed the add-on licensure program. She already has her master's degree, and she just completed it. So I did provide you an example of what the OMA should look like. Here's the template. Here's the example. The next step is for me to write it for you. I'm not going to do that. So I have the things for you that you need under this week's session. In terms of content for tonight, I want to start with North Carolina General Statutes. I'm not going to cover them all tonight because there are 500 under 115C. There are 545 general statutes for education in North Carolina. There's a similar number in South Carolina. The one that I'm going to focus on tonight is 288, Duties and Responsibilities of the School Principal. Again, there's one for everything you can think of. But I'm going to focus on this one tonight in terms of legally, what is your job? First thing is to grade and classify pupils. You already knew that. Teachers don't assign grades, principals do. I hope you all knew that. I hope I'm not letting the cat out of the bag here. Final grades go to the principals. So in the past I've heard teachers complain about me to me. You changed my grade. Well, yes, I did. You're not allowed to do that. Oh, yes, I am. Unless you can show me evidence different that, in terms of what you gave, then, it's my responsibility to sign the final grade. And I've done it good and bad. Gave less than the teacher gave them and gave them more than the teacher gave them based on the data. Now, as you know, in this class, I have everything set up on electronic grade book. Every time you turn something in, if it's good enough quality, it gets 100 points. You have the possibility. I even gave you 100 points for putting your contact information in. See what a nice guy I am? Now, you can make 3,800 points in this class. If you make 3,000, you get your A. It's just that simple. I have objective criteria. I mean, I don't say, well, he turned this in, but I didn't like it, so I gave him a fit. No, if you turn it in and it's acceptable, you get your points. That way I've taken all the subjectivity out of the grading, because I used to hate dealing with teachers as a principal who, I just didn't feel like they got this, or I thought this, or I thought, can you show me your rubric for grading? Well, no, I really don't have. Well, then it's just your opinion, and remember, the students that need love the most deserve it the least. Usually, it's the ones that aggravate us to death. Well, you can't just grade him because you don't like him. You need to have a standardized system. So for me, you get 100 points. You turn your activities in, you get 100 points. If they're acceptable, I don't grade them in terms of, well, that's a 65, or on some subjective rubric, you get 100 or you don't. If it meets the criteria, then we're good to go. And when you get your 3,000 points and you have your required turn-ins of your evidence artifacts, you've made your A. I think I've got it set up on 2,500 points makes a B, 2,000, or an A minus. I think you have to make 2,000 points to pass. But I've got the grade center set up that way. I do it because, as a principal, I always was angry at teachers who would not do that, who wanted to hold some of that power over their students and be abusive with it. And that's why principals have been given the power to grade and classify, to right wrongs, basically. And that's why. Got two questions here. Let me go to them. Am I saying that the principal must look at the report cards? Nope, I'm not saying that you have to do that. What I'm saying is when there is a issue, you have to make the decision. You know, some principals want to look at them before they go out. They have the right to do that. Some don't. I wouldn't look at them before they went out. But when there was an appeal on a grade, I have to make the final decision. And as the teacher, the first thing I would ask you is, show me the evidence of why you gave this student this grade. Well, you know, and it can't be, well, I just felt like it, or, you know what a bad actor this kid is. Don't start with that stuff. Show me the hard data in terms of how you determine this child's grade. So no, I'm not saying that you have to review grades before they go out. I'm not saying that you're not allowed to. You are legally allowed to look at them if you want to. But when it comes down to it, when there is a dispute, you are the one who has to take the heat and settle it. Because if you make the parent happy, the teacher's mad. If you make the teacher happy, the parent's mad. So you get the best of both worlds there. But see, I'm like the pig. I like it when you get in the mud and wrestle with me. It just makes me happy, and you just get mud all over you. So I kind of liked it when they got mad. But normal people don't like that. But that's part of the job. A principal is you have to be the bad guy, and you trust me. There are some teachers that never get over that. You changed my grade. They remember it 10 years later. He changed my grade. Can't let it go because it's a power trip with them. And the whole notion here is, in order to take that subjectivity, that power trip, that ego away and negate that so that children get what they deserve, that's why the state of North Carolina, the General Assembly, empowered principals to do the final grade, period. All right. About, is there any views on when a student is failing a class but passes the final? Normally that's taken care of. That's a district policy in terms of how much weighting each of those things, and it goes by district to district. That's one of the things, if you're new to a district or if you don't know what it is, when you get your first AP job, that's one of the first things I'd ask for is what is the grading policy in terms of how much everything counts. We all know that the state exam counts so much, the final exam counts so much, the quarter grade counts so much, those kinds of things. Again, it's supposed to be posted where parents have access to that so that they know. I mean, that's why I was talking about, you know what my grading scale is. You know how many points you can make. All you got to do is look in the grade center and count the number of columns I got in there, and you'll see that there's 38. And you know that they all count exactly the same. I have not weighted them differently. Different school districts weight things differently. Got to be careful about that. That's a caution from somebody who spent 11 years in the central office as well. You got to be careful about that weighting business because that punishes and rewards inequitably, unfortunately. Because we know quarter grades are greatly affected by attendance and discipline, and disproportionately penalize at-risk children. It's almost identifiable. Almost identifiable. So you have to be careful about that weighting. If you put too much weight on that, because then you're putting too much emphasis on attendance and discipline rather than outcomes, which is achievement. We're in the achievement business. Let me say that again. We're in the achievement business. And teachers that stray away from the grading policies of the district, that's when you have to right the wrongs. Well, I counted my test more than the state test. No, you better make sure your teachers are following the district policy on the weighting. But because again, putting the emphasis on teacher-made tests and grading many times is identifiable in terms of groups. At-risk kids don't attend and behave as well as others. And if you weight that work heavier than the actual final exams and the state exams, then you are punishing them in effect for who they are, not what they did. Some people don't agree with that, but that's what courts have found. So you have to be careful, and that's why districts have specific policies on weighting. All right, so along with grading and classifying, the principal's decision to retain a child, the principal makes a decision to retain. And it's based on the pupil's standardized test scores, and those test scores that shall be verified as accurate. Again, it takes that subjective teacher, again, that way it's not based on something that, again, a weighting. Your decision about to retain a child should be based on state testing. Because, again, there's been lawsuits over that. Again, teacher and school-based tests, and grades, a lot of that is based on attendance and behavior. And it should be based on achievement. Being retained or not retained should be based on achievement, not attendance and behavior. A principal shall not require additional testing of a student entering public school from a school governed under this, if the scores from a nationally standardized test are adequate to determine the appropriate placement of the child are available. You can't be doing competency tests and put kids in whatever grade you want to. And that sometimes happens in order to keep them from taking tests that count against your report card. Sometimes schools will get kids in the primary grades that have been like in a private school or have been homeschooled, and they'll want to test them before they put them in the third grade because they're afraid their test scores are going to count against them. That's against the law. Again, that's identifiable. Can't do that. It says so right here. And I know some schools that do that or try to do that or have tried to. Hopefully yours isn't. But think about that. You have a parent show up at your door and say, my child is 7 years old going into the third grade. Going to be 8, is 8 years old, 7, going to be 8, one of them summer boys or something like that. And you're thinking, oh my Lord, this poor kid, he's still a booger eater. What am I going to do? I'm going to put him in third grade. He's going to kill my test scores. What if I give him a test because he's been homeschooled or he's been in some kind of a private or parochial school or church school? What I'll do is I'll give him a test, and that way I can put him back in second grade. He's young for his grade anyway. I'll put him back in second grade. We'll get a year to catch him up, and his test scores won't hurt him. You don't think principals hadn't thought about that? I was an elementary principal. It's been a long time ago. When I was an elementary principal, we started what's called performance-based accountability, which became the state ABC program in North Carolina, our first venture into accountability. You don't think elementary principals wasn't figuring that stuff out very quickly? Very quickly. How to keep those kids from counting against them, their test scores. That's why this law had to be put in. When we started accountability, and the basic ed plan was passed in '84. It took 5 years before what was called the standard course of study. Some of you are old enough to remember the old white notebooks, the standard course of study in them. It was fully implemented by 1989, and away we went on accountability. First year in '89-'90 was called performance-based accountability. That morphed into the state ABC program. And principals, the first thing they started figuring out was, how can we keep these dumb kids' test scores from hurting us? That's exactly what we did. I didn't. I wasn't smart enough to do that. But people who had been in it for a long time, that's the first thing they did. That's the first thing. First thing we were told by the superintendent is no more bluebirds, buzzards, and robins. You got to quit ability grouping them by class. You have to do heterogeneous grouping. And the parents went crazy. They hated it. They just tried to kill us. Oh my God. I had one parent call me and said, why is my kid in the dumb class? I said, your kid's not in the dumb class. I mixed them all, different ability groups. She said, oh no, Johnny's in that class. Everybody knows he's an idiot. You put my kid in the dumb class. That's the kind of things that we dealt with in the early 90s in a lot of states, dealing with when we started accountability programs. And people abused that by giving them little tests and other things, trying to keep some of these kids out of the first 3 years, kindergarten, first and second doesn't hurt you, but you got to take in the end of grade, at the end of the third grade. So a lot of people will try to keep kids out of third grade. And that's when parents who had been homeschooling or and other little preschools or private parochial schools, they all wanted to bring them to public school starting in the third grade. And so people tried to develop ways to keep them out. And so that's why that law was added under laws of the principle. You can't do that. It's against the law to do it. All right, to make accurate reports to the superintendent and local board, you got to get your paperwork in every month. We do it electronically now. North Carolina uses PowerSchool. All of your data goes in through it, so it's not as hard as it used to be. Your attendance is done that way. We don't keep the old registers with blue sheets anymore. Your attendance, your grades, all those things go in. You have to make all of your reports. That you have to payroll sheets. Everything has to go in. That has to be done. You have a principal's monthly report on attendance that has to be entered in every day. You can't falsify your attendance because there's money involved. We'll talk later this semester when we get to the finance part. When schools are allotted monies from the state in terms of per pupil, we talk about the state, funds per pupil, gives $7,000 per pupil. They don't give you the $7,000 up front. They give it to you in 10 monthly installments after the month is over, and they only pay for the students who attended that month. So if you've got 1,000 kids and your attendance that month was 95%, they pay you for 950 students rather than 1,000. State doesn't pay you for the ones on the roll. They only pay you for the ones that show up. So that's why attendance is important. And they don't give you the money up front. They give it to you. You voucher it after the month. It's called a modified accrual accounting system. We'll cover that later in the semester. But that's why they have to be accurate, because there's money attached to them. To improve instruction and community spirit, that means you have to organize for instruction with a master schedule, and you have to supervise your teachers. Conduct fire drills and inspect for fire hazards. Now, here's one of those you better be listening moments. This will be your job as a new AP. This will be the first thing they hand you. Trust me. Will be conduct fire drills. Now, everybody knows you have to do a monthly fire drill. But what everybody doesn't know is twice a month you have to inspect for fire hazards. You as the AP and the custodian have to walk around the building and look for fire hazards twice a month. I have an facilities assessment inventory that I'm going to have you do this semester, and where you go and look at all these different things. And I have them laid out for you, and you file those reports every month with yourself in case there's a problem in your building and you get sued, or somebody says that, well, because it was this ongoing problem and the path was blocked for egress or whatever, or the fire marshal comes and finds something bad. If this is to protect you. I'm not saying if you do this assessment inventory, nothing bad will ever happen in your school. What I'm saying is when it does happen, you won't lose your job or lose your house because you get sued. We'll talk about financial liability later this semester as well. And so you have to do a fire drill every month and conduct 2 safety inspections every month. Right here it is in front of you. And so I have a form for you. I developed it for Charlotte Mecklenburg, and I'll share it with you. It's the duty of each principal to inspect the buildings in his charge at least twice a month. Cafeterias, gymnasiums, boiler room, storage room, auditorium, stage areas. Be for the purpose of keeping safe from the accumulation of trash and other fire hazards. You got to have a written report. That's what I'm talking about. And I have that form for you. Your district should have one. If they don't, you can use mine. But it's all fun and games till somebody gets their eye put out. Till you have a fire. I've had a fire. Second principalship, I had a fire. You better make sure that you've been doing your due diligence on your fire drills and safety inspections, or there's going to be trouble. What about high school courses? Are you allowed to give placement tests before scheduling a student for foundations regular? Oh yeah, you're allowed to do that. No. What the law was talking about is enrolling a kid in your school and what grade level you put him in. This is about courses is different. Of course, you're allowed to do that for courses. We're talking about usually, grade placement is an elementary issue. That's not what the law addresses. It doesn't address courses. It addresses what grade you enroll the kid in. You also have to check the fire extinguishers monthly. I did a fire safety walkthrough yesterday. Absolutely, that's on the list. That's on the assessment inventory that we'll look at later this semester. Is you have to check the expiration dates on your and make sure that somebody hadn't set one off and then put it back and it's been expended. You have that's on the list is checking your fire extinguishers. To discipline students and assign duties to teachers with regard to discipline, general well-being, and medical care of students. Write down the number 45, 4 or 5. What's the significance of 45? Every principal has to do should do a master schedule, a duty roster, and a supervision schedule. A duty roster is during the day. Who covers bus duty, who covers car rider duty, who covers the cafeteria during lunch, who's in the gym, and the number of students that one faculty member can legally supervise in those kind of areas is 45. When you go to court, that's the standard that they're going to apply to you. So you got 450 students in the cafeteria. How many faculty members do you have to have in there? That would be 10. What happens? Now, I'm not telling you that a fight won't break out in a high school cafeteria if you have 10 teachers in there. That's not what I'm telling you. What I'm telling you is when the fight breaks out in the high school cafeteria and you have 10 teachers in there, when you get sued because a faculty member blows his knee out during, responding to that incident, you will be okay legally. What I'm telling you is if you had 3 in there and that same injury occurred, they're going to fry you when you get sued. Now, here's the irony on this one. The assistant principal who was in charge of this kind of thing at a high school in Charlotte, he was the one that blew his knee out, but he sued the district because there wasn't enough people in there supervising. And it was his job to do the duty roster to make sure that they were there. That's how he knew they weren't there. And he won. And he won. If they're not there, they're not there. And so when you do a duty roster, again, you don't want anybody to get hurt, faculty or staff or students. You don't want anybody to get hurt. But also, you don't want you to get hurt career-wise or financially. So, 450 kids in the cafeteria, got to have 10 faculty members. Well, teachers, I don't want to have to go. I want duty-free time. Well, we give you duty-free time during planning, but you have to have lunch with your kids because we need enough bodies in the lunchroom to have adequate supervision and to protect ourselves if we have to go to court if somebody gets hurt. Supervision schedule is after-school activities. That's what a supervision schedule. And now, for some reason, stupid people and people who get unemployed fairly quickly think, well, that same standard doesn't apply after school. If it's on your campus, it applies after school as well. You can't have a football team and one coach with 80 kids out there, and then one of them, breaks his neck. You're fried. Yeah, you got all these assistant coaches that you think not worth, shooting all of them together, but you got to have them because of the number of kids. So duty roster is during the day. Supervision is at night. Can I go over those numbers again? 1 to 45. When you're in open areas like the cafeteria or the gym or places like that, 1 to 45. You got to have one faculty member for every 45 kids in order to come out of court unscathed if you didn't do anything else bad. Now, if you had a problem and you knew a problem existed and you hadn't dealt with it, that's a different story. But if you get charged with inadequate supervision, that my kid got hurt because you didn't have adequate supervision, and that's the most common way that you get sued nowadays. My kid got into a scuffle out at the bus lot and he fell and skinned his knee and fell and hit his head, and now he's so dumb he's going to have to have a job with his name on his shirt for the rest of his life. Well, he was probably headed that way anyway. But if you don't have but a couple of teachers out there and there's 2 bus loads of kids and there's only a couple of teachers and there's, you're okay as long as it's less than 90. But say there's 4 buses came in, you don't have but 2 teachers out there and unloaded all at the same time. So what some schools will do, if you've noticed this, as the buses come in, they make them wait. They won't let them just line up and unload all of them at one time. They make them pull up and unload 1 at a time or 2 at a time. Guess why? So that there's never more than 90 kids with 2 teachers out there unloaded at one time. And when they get those off and kind of get them in the building, and then they let the next bus unload. Usually those are the schools that have had somebody hurt and they've had a lawsuit or had somebody complain about that. And so I see that in places that I go. Places that are taking the risk are the ones that just let them come rolling up, 3 or 4 buses at a time and dump all of them. There's just 2 teachers out there on bus duty in the wintertime freezing to death. And there's, 100, 150 kids out there getting off buses at one time and 2 teachers. If something goes wrong, it doesn't matter. If you'd have had 100 teachers, you couldn't have prevented it. But you in fact, had inadequate supervision. This is the hard facts of life. Dale, you sound awfully hard. Don't really care about people getting hurt. No, I do care about staff and students not being hurt. But the biggest thing I'm trying to teach you is protect yourself. Be smart. Have your duty roster. Have your supervision plan. Don't have to go to court and say, yeah, we had 200 kids and 1 teacher. It doesn't matter that the kid that was the stupidest was the one that got hurt and it was his fault to begin with. That's immaterial in court. He's the best. Butter wouldn't melt in his mouth. He's the finest kid ever when you go to court. That's the way it works in real life. Reasonable force, suspension, those things, we'll cover that more later on this semester. Don't use corporal punishment. And corporal punishment is more than just beating them. It's like running them and doing, other things like that, physical things. Don't do any of that stuff. Even though it can be allowable, most school boards have said, no, don't do it. And you're putting your career at risk to do any kind of corporal punishment. Suspension, make sure you follow all the rules, especially with exceptional children. We'll cover that later this semester. One thing that I've had to say to parents on numerous occasions when parents would come back at me when I'd say I was suspending their kid, parents would say, but it's not good for my child. And the first thing I would say to them, ma'am, I completely agree. I never told you that suspension was good for your child. It's good for the rest of us. We need a break from your child. And so you have to understand that suspension is kind of the last resort, but you have to do it because your job is to protect the group. We can't let the rights of the individual supersede the rights of the group. One kid's acting a fool and 25 aren't learning in the room. We can't do that. So suspension is a viable tool. It's not the first option, but it has to be an option. And hopefully we'll talk later this semester about how to use it appropriately. To protect school property, you can't You can't be allowing people to tear your place up, tag it, do those kinds of things. And also community use of schools. You can't allow people to come in and use your campus, even though they might be neighborhood people or good people or those kinds of things, or a church that you're involved in or somebody that you like. Make sure that all use of your facilities go through community use of facilities. There's a department in your school district that handles that and does the contracts and the liability. One of my saddest stories of all time is the tale of Jerry Winklejohn. If any of you ever worked in Charlotte Mecklenburg, Jerry was a young principal. He was an AP when he came to the district, and he worked his way up to principal, and he was still fairly young, and he was involved in a flag football league, those adult flag football leagues that are so popular. They were several years ago in Charlotte Mecklenburg, and in and around there. Every ball field, on the weekends, you'd see adults out there with flags, flag football league, and he was involved in one of those. And they asked him, since he was principal at Ransom, could they use his field, and he would participate with them. And Jerry dove for a pass himself, the school principal there at Ransom Middle, broke his neck, paralyzed from the nose down. Not covered by insurance or workman's comp, wasn't work related, no insurance because it didn't do community use of schools. They were basically trespassing. One of the saddest things I've come across in my career. It's an abject lesson. Not a nicer man in the world either. Not a nicer man in the world. Wouldn't have done something wrong for all the tea in China. But he was the one that let the group out there, and then it just so happened he was the one that got paralyzed. No relief from the district whatsoever. No workman's comp. Very limited insurance. It was a sad tale. Absolutely true. But it reminds us all, you're supposed to protect that property. And that protection is not just from it getting torn up, but from lawsuits from people using it illegally. So all groups other than school groups have to go through community use of schools to report certain acts of crime and violence of law enforcement superintendent. We're going to go over this one big time later on. I actually added a video link to week 5 today about an assistant principal that's being charged. She's had to go to court. I think it was Colorado today for not reporting a sexual assault. There are 16 acts of crime and violence. 7 of them are acts of crime. 9 of them are acts of violence. The federal law, No Child Left Behind, says you have to report them. And those 9 acts of violence count against you in a calculation for a persistently dangerous school. If you don't have anything that's pressing on your agenda, you ought to read the No Child Left Behind legislation. It says 2 things. No child should have to go to a low-performing school. It also says no child should have to go to a school that's persistently dangerous. And the penalty is the same in terms of you have to calculate those acts of violence. And if you exceed a certain level, the kid gets to opt to go to another. You have to take the kid to another school, or you have to reconstitute that school, same as if it were low-performing academically. So schools have vested interest in not reporting acts of crime and violence or trying to underreport them. And that's all fun and games till somebody goes to the police. This lady made 2 mistakes. Number one, she didn't report it when it was reported to her. And then she tried to investigate it on her own. You are not, let me repeat, you are not qualified to do investigations of a sexual nature. If somebody comes and says that something sexual has happened to them, you call the law immediately, if not sooner. They used to call me as the deputy superintendent. They'd call me. I'd say, did you call the law yet? No. Well, hang up. Don't call me. Call the law first. I don't want it to be seen as you and I are colluding to hide or cover this up. If somebody has reported a sexual infraction to you, you need to call the police. You got your own school resource officer if you're a secondary school. If not, you've got the number of the one next door at the school next door. You turn it over to them, and they'll bring in the sex crime squad to do the investigation. But you are not, you're qualified to do a lot of things, but not investigations of a sexual nature. Again, in Charlotte-Mecklenburg, if you're within the city limits of Charlotte, you have a CMPD officer assigned to your school as a school resource officer at middle and high school. If you're in one of the outlying towns, you have a police officer from that town. Now, we had an incident at North Meck a few years ago, and it ended up with some people having to go home that worked there because when the young lady made the report to the school officials, they ignored her basically by saying, well, she's 16 years old. It was consensual. And then when the parent went and reported to the police went on TV, the Huntersville police went on TV and said, we think something bad happened there, but we don't know because the school contaminated the evidence. Basically threw the school under the bus. We had no choice, but we had to make some personnel moves there. Well, the school's biggest mistake was not reading the law, and we're going to go over that law later this semester. And it says if a child is self-contained, it means that they're this child was in a self-contained classroom there. She was what the state considers to be mentally incapacitated. You can't consent to sex at any age. That age of 16 does not apply to kids that are self-contained EC. They do not have the wherewithal to consent to sex. And the AP made the decision based on, well, she's 16, and didn't bother to tell anybody. The former AP and the former principal. When stuff like that happens, multiple people have to go home. And so you've got to report those things, and you can't contaminate the evidence. We'll talk about that more. And it says you have to report them to law enforcement. Then you will notify the superintendent or designee in writing or email about the report made to law enforcement. You see how that works? It doesn't say call them first. It says you will call them about the report that you made to law enforcement. So that means who do you have to call first? You have to call the law first. Can't be any collusion, folks, or it can't be seen to be any collusion. To make available school budget and school improvement plans, I'll ask you to find those later. You were supposed to have already found the school improvement plan last semester when you did the APSEL and the APTEL. This semester, I'll have you find your school budget. And then when your principal tells you we don't make those available, you tell them, yes, you do, because the law says. The principal shall maintain a copy of the school's current budget and school improvement plan, including any amendments, and shall allow parents of children in school or other interested persons, that would be you, to obtain such documents. And it can't be, we'll get them to you later. They're supposed to have a copy on hand. When you walk in, they're supposed to be able to hand you that school budget. To evaluate licensed employees and develop mandatory improvement plans. We'll talk about that later this semester. Transfer student records to sign driving eligibility. Obtain necessary written consent from parents in order to disclose information to the DMV. Notify the DMV when a student has lost control, loses license, conditions kick in. That's if you're a high school principal, you have to know what those are. Establish school improvement teams, which means you have to have a school improvement plan. That's what we're teaching you through the evidence artifacts. Everybody understands that the 6 evidence artifacts mimic the school improvement plan process in a school. The reason why we make you do it, the state requires us to, or the states require us to. But number 2, because the law says you have to establish school improvement teams that develop that plan. You can't just go back in the back and make it up yourself. There's a process that we're teaching you how it has to be developed. And then deal with family members in the military. So those are the state laws in North Carolina. You can find the ones in South Carolina. They mimic these. But these are the things that you have to do as a principal. We'll get into each of these more in depth as the semester goes along. But I want to introduce you. This is just one of the 545 in North Carolina, and there's a similar number in South Carolina, statutes governing public education. All right, new share. Back to the desktop. Get out of that one. All right, your crisis box emergency plan, you should open that up and look at it. And that tells you what you're looking for this week when you go out and find yours. I won't go through all of that. That facilities assessment inventory, we're going to have you use that later, but I referenced it tonight in the law. This is what it would look like, and so I'm going to spend the remainder of my couple of minutes here looking at it with you. Again, if you want to know what a crisis emergency plan is supposed to have in it, your crisis box, right here is, before you go out and assess it, you should look at this to see what you should expect to find in it when you do this week's discussion board assignment. Your facilities assessment inventory, when I have you do that later this semester, this is the one I developed in Charlotte, Mecklenburg. Let me see what question I have here. The OMA templates, an example, are under week 2. Under week 2. All right. If you don't see it, let me know. All right. So here's what it looks like. Bus loading and drop-off zones are clearly defined, separated from each other, where car riders don't go running through the bus lot or vice versa. Bus riding kids don't go running through the traffic circle where parents are dropping off kids. They're separated. Other vehicles are prohibited from using bus loading and unloading zones. Student access to parking areas is restricted. That's for high school. Security personnel monitor student movement at crosswalks and areas involving bus and vehicle. That's again about having enough people out there on supervision. Don't mean a kid won't get hit or run over. It just means that when junior does go wandering out in the road, at least you had enough people on supervision. Directional signs, video cameras, doors are exterior, all closed and locked all at the same time. No outside doors ever propped open. Those chains where you dog down a door with the panic bars on them and those are illegal. Can't have those. Multiple entrances to the building are controlled. Classroom doors are kept locked when rooms are vacant, so kids can't slip in there and do ugly things. Lockers are also dogged down where you can't get in them if they're not in use. All these things about control points, two-way communication, classroom doors equipped with heavy-duty vandal-resistant locks that are operable from the inside by turning the handle. That means that kids can't lock themselves, or you can't lock yourself in a room. All these things, doors to the boiler room, what they have to be. Can't have chemicals on the floor, first aid kits, OSHA, hazardous chemicals. Have to be secured and disposed of. Chemical stores are labeled. Chemicals are not stored on the floor. I got a call. One of the high schools in Charlotte failed an inspection by the fire marshal. And I said, well, what in the world have they done? And I went running out to that high school, and the custodians, because they were so lazy, had taken all their cleaning supplies and all these dangerous chemicals, and they had taken some of those petitions like you use in classrooms and petitioned them a place off in the back of the cafeteria and put all their chemicals back in the cafeteria where kids ate, because so it would be easier. They wouldn't have to go walk to the other end of the building and get their cleaning chemicals. Didn't have a door, didn't have a lock, just had a classroom petition up. Just petitioned them off an area in the back and put all the chemicals there on the floor. The fire marshal, he would have put somebody in jail if he'd had the authority. He gave us the biggest fine possible, but he made it daily until we got it. Of course, we corrected it that day. So we only got hit for $500, but the fine was $500 a day. And he would have locked somebody up if he'd had the authority. That's the kind of stuff. I mean, you get caught doing that, and we had to pretty much let some people go over that one as well. Safety posters, emergency procedures, storage, bomb threat, crisis response guidelines, all that stuff has to be present and complete. Fire evacuation, graffitis recorded and removed immediately. Visitor login, fire extinguishers have to be checked. That's on this list. Those are the kinds of things you got to do twice a month. That's the kind of stuff that the fire marshal, things you don't even think about. That's the kind of stuff the fire marshal is going to be looking for. No halls blocked. I went into a school and they were using a, a, a car battery to prop open an outside door. Things like that. I mean, you can't have stuff like that. I mean, the fire marshal comes, he'll get mad at you, and that's putting it mildly. So this is what you would do in terms of doing what we'll have you do this audit on your school later this semester. Back to this again. Okay, new share. All right, go back to desktop again. All right, I am in, let me close this stuff out. I'm in the O2 shell, and if I go to Zoom session 2, there is the OMA template and example. Let me move over to the O8 shell as well. It may have disappeared, very much so, could have disappeared out of the O8 shell. Again, that's what I was explaining. We've been having all these problems in Blackboard. Let me go to the O8 shell and see if it's still there or if it was one of the things that fell out this week. Let me go to the O8 shell. I'm betting it fell out, and it did. Not a problem. I'll just put it back in again. I'll put the OMA template. Store and go. Okay. OMA template open. Okay, there that is, and let me see. All right, and I'll put the other one in just a minute. I'll put the other one in. It's just that. So if you have things that you need, that you've seen or that you've seen me discuss and you'd like it, I can put it in just that easily. We can put more stuff in because this is going to be your toolkit. You're going to download this stuff and keep it. Not just stuff on the OMA, but things that I put in there for you to use. You're going to download and keep it because you may not need it today or tomorrow, but somewhere down the road might be good to go back and review. I remember what he told me. That knucklehead that was telling me all them crazy stories. I better be looking for this or for that. So just if there's things that you're interested in, let me know, and I can post them just that quickly in our shells, and I'll put your exemplar in there just in a few minutes. All right. Can I also join someone's class from Jordan in the 08 class? I'm also a readmit. Join with. Let's see. Let me see. Go ahead and join with Tremaine. That would be, y'all could work together. That would be great.
Okay.
That would be great if y'all could work together. Now, you have your books, Jordan?
Yeah, I do.
All right. So I just got to, again, Tremaine, we'll get you yours. I'll get them expedited to you as fast as possible.
Okay.
We'll get you your books. Again, we had some folks in the wrong sections, but hopefully we've got everybody in the right places now. I want everybody to be where they need to be. That's very important. All right. Questions you have for me? I see my time is about up. Let me see. Got one more question here. Thanks. Okay. Thank everybody for joining me tonight. Go back and look at those statutes. You can see, there's 545 of them. Look at some of these other things. Be sure to look at that crisis box emergency plan section that I have right here, so you'll know what to look for when you go out and find yours and assess it. This will tell you what you're looking for. Again, I hate that it's so topical. I hate it that I have to start with this every semester. But as you can see, unfortunately, we've had 2 school shootings this week. You better know this stuff. It's about life and death. And it's also about the life and death of your career. But it also affects people's actual life and death. So it's important. I hate that it is, but it is. I've enjoyed our time together, as always. Let me know if there's something I can help you with or post. If there's anything I can do for you, let me know. That's a good thing about being the chair. I get to make the decision. So if there's something you need, let me know. I'll talk to you next week. Y'all have a good week.
All right,
Thank
you too.
you.
Thanks.